All right, so one more time. Good morning, everyone. This focus of the workshop is about committees and how you can utilize them within your chapter. And my name is Allison Lehman, and I am the National Vice President for Communication Recognition for Tau Beta Sigma. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a life member of the Eta Gamma chapter at Boston University, where I received a Bachelor of Philosophy degree with a minor in public health, then a Master of Public Health degree, and then just this past, 2 years ago now, it's 2022, not 2021. In 2020, I earned a certification in organization development as a professional. I live in New Jersey and I work in healthcare and organization development. So I currently oversee a team of about 400 medical scribes that work in emergency departments across New York and New Jersey. And I actually started off in my summer job while in college working as a scribe myself. And then I came into the management team right after my master's degree, actually, and started to take on different roles and opportunities in the organization. So that's a little bit about me. So the overview for our morning is that we're going to talk about guidance on how to create, implement, and work with committees at your chapter level. So first we'll go through the basics of the what, which, and why of committees, then talk about the how-to, so how we can strategically organize and utilize committees for the biggest impact for any chapter or group. And then lastly, talking about what the benefits are, both for the individuals that are a part of a group and for your chapter overall. If at any point you have questions, feel free to just unmute and chat. I'd like to be conversational, but you can also use the raise hand function. So I like this African proverb of if you want to go far, go together. I think that may hopefully have all heard how if you want to go fast, go alone. So you can always sprint on your own, but you can only go then as far as your legs are able to carry you. Where if you're working within a team, within a community, you're able to rely upon one another and really go for the long distance. And for each of us in our band programs, in our chapters, and for the national organization of Tau Beta Sigma, we definitely want to utilize that community and support of all members, the support from all members to be successful, not just for these past 75 years where we've done that, but for the next 75 and the next 75 after that. So first, we're going to go through the basics. So the definition of a committee is, of course, you can read it, but a group of people appointed for a specific function, typically being consisted of members from a larger group, or people who come together to work on a specific project and commit their efforts on accomplishing that specific task. So the first question I'm going to open up to the group, in your experience, what is the purpose of our committees in Tau Beta Sigma? Whoever wants to go. Anybody? Yeah, Michael.
I think in general, the purpose is to provide a bit of structure. Like we have a lot of things as a chapter that we want to get done and then we want to accomplish a lot of goals. But if it was just like one person trying to do it, it wouldn't get accomplished that well.
Right.
And so we use committees to kind of give everybody an opportunity to participate, maybe in specific different groups or tasks.
Yeah, I love that. And I especially like what you talked about, and we'll dive into it more, of giving everyone the opportunity to participate and to kind of have there's ownership in the chapter already, but to have a bit more ownership of specific tasks and functions. Thank you. So committees are used to break up the work of a chapter into those smaller focus groups. What a committee looks like from chapter to chapter, and even maybe from year to year, might change based on the needs of the chapter, based on the member makeup of the chapter. But something that's very important is that it empowers everyone, every single member, to participate, contribute, and also to lead tasks and projects as you gain more experience. Okay, so the next question, what are committees? Like what are they and what are they not? We could have a couple of different voices would be great. I'm also not afraid of cold calling, but I don't want to do that. It is a Sunday morning and we should all come in as we are ready. All right, for this one, I'll give you a pass. So committees are resources for chapters and groups to have in-depth discussions. So you may be able to have high level focus of a discussion with the full chapter, but in order to really dive into the details, you're focusing on that committee to have that conversation. Resources for event planning and research for new events, getting new members involved in the chapter's business where they might not have, and they need more experience before they can have official officer roles or chair positions, but they can make an impact immediately at the committee level. And then this is also a way to share the wealth of leadership. So there may only be a president, a VP, vice president of membership, vice president of service, secretary, treasurer at a minimum, and even that may be more officer positions than some chapters have, but there may be 10 members. How can we distribute the wealth of opportunity and growth and learning to every member so they can grow through the organization? And on the flip side, committees aren't a way to say, I don't care about fundraising. I never want to talk about fundraising. So a member can't check out of business they aren't interested in by not participating in that committee. Because at the end of the day, all of the work and planning and all of the events are brought back to the whole chapter for the whole chapter to put their effort into executing. Committees also aren't solely responsible for completing their tasks. Like I said, the work that discussions and work that happen in the committee get brought back to the whole chapter. They're also definitely not meant to be a punishment. There should never be punishments within Tau Beta Sigma for having different expectations. So the service committee is always expected to show up 2 hours before every game day because they're the only ones that are loading the trucks. That should be a full chapter involvement, but perhaps the service committee are the ones who are really task specialists, so they can lead how it should be done. They can be the point person for working with the drumline or with the color guard, and then coordinating the efforts of everyone else. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, okay. Okay, so within Tau Beta Sigma, we have, and really any organization that follows Robert's Rules of Order, there are these 3 different committee types. So in TBS, we have standing committees. So these are identified by the Constitution or whatever the governing document is for an organization. They're focused on regular operations. So spoiler alert for like 2 slides from now, but we have service and fundraising and membership and things of that nature, nominations. Well, nominations comes later. You have ad hoc committees that may be created for a very specific focus. So we often hear about chapters being the group that plans a 50th anniversary, or for a band anniversary to be a special planning subset to make sure it's successful. In this past biennium, for any of you who were active during that time, and hopefully some of you were able to attend National Convention, we had the 75th anniversary planning committee that took place over the whole biennium and really started even before then. That was led by a large group of individuals across the organization. And then the National Council was a part of that in small ways, but the committee overall was really what guided that events planning. And then convention-based. So the standing committees and the ad hoc committees, they're taking place over a period of time, whether it's year over year or for a specified period of time for the ad hoc, where convention-based committees are happening at that convention. Really, they're only being filled by members who are present at that event. So it's called for during the convention setting, and this is also outlined in the Constitution, and it's only made of the seated delegates or members of that event's delegation. How many people here have ever been a delegate at a convention for TBS or another organization? Michael, you have. Do you mind just sharing what the experience was like for you?
Yeah, so at the national convention, I was actually a proxy delegate for a chapter that didn't show up, and then at the recent district, I was a delegate for my chapter. And so it was really cool, I guess, to kind of be the voice for my chapter and to kind of think about what my chapter wants as a whole, and what, because it's not just like what you would vote for, it's what you think your chapter would want to do. And then obviously I also served on those, committees at those conventions as a delegate.
And that was my next question. What committees did you serve on?
At NatCon, I was on the Spirit Committee, which was a lot of fun. We learned all the chants and the cheers, and we got to do that like in front of the delegation. And then at district, I was the chair of the membership committee, which was a really cool experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're the committee pro right now. And I saw another thumbs up. I think it was from Katie Dukes. Katie, do you want to talk anything? I know Katie is one of our Southwest District counselors, but I'm happy to put her on the spot to chime in about committee experience.
Yeah, so as a or as a convention delegate, it was really cool. When I was a student, we didn't have like group chats and things like that. So we would have to actually go meet with our chapter in a small group during the business portion. We would have a caucus or whatever. And it was a really interesting experience because sometimes I might not have agreed with what my chapter decided, but as a delegate, I still had to vote in the voice of the chapter. And I think that kind of sometimes it puts you in that perspective, like what we were talking about in the last session with the 8 and the 5. They trusted you, and you had to have that loyalty to the chapter to do what they're kind of speak on their behalf and do their wishes. Maybe not what your personal views were, but just what would be best for the chapter.
Yeah. And do you recall any specific committees that you've sat on and what kind of the work was like in that background?
Yeah, I've advised different committees, and then of course Spirit and Sisterhood. That's always a fun one, like what Michael mentioned. And then I was on jurisdiction. I got to advise that one year, and that was really fun because um, I think sometimes it might seem like a boring committee, but it's kind of exciting because you're literally the ones making the changes to the Constitution, and you have to be very particular about the way you word things because one small misstep and it can mean something completely different than what was intended.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thinking about from a convention setting, those committees, they meet quickly, but they have to dive in right away and dive pretty deeply, especially for things like jurisdiction changes or for ways and means in general, because that's the guiding way that we will work for that next chunk of time, whether it's a year at the district level or the next 2 years at the national level, and it has long-standing impact. So that's really great. All right, we'll keep on rolling. So there's a few more things just about convention committees. So an open committee, anyone can attend and participate in discussion, and then the delegates are able to vote if there's things to be voted on. For committee business, moderated means that any member may attend to listen, so not everyone can speak because only the identified delegates have that ability. And then a closed committee is where only delegates can attend. I actually have a funny story for myself about closed committees when I didn't know better. But committee business is kept confidential and within the walls of that, aside from the official report. So my side note, a story about this is at my very first district convention. It was at the University of Massachusetts in 2009. I had become a sister 3 weeks beforehand, maybe. That's probably being generous. And I attended with my big sister and a few of our brothers from our brother chapter. And we got into the first committee and workshop session. And I said, you know what? I want to go to the nominations committee because I want to hear more about the people who are running for positions to make sure that I can make an informed decision as a delegate. I knew nothing about the process. So I walked straight over to the noms committee meeting and I sat down at the conference table. And finally, the district counselor at the time, whose name is Tom Franklin, he came in and was like, I don't think that you're supposed to be here. Like, you're not on my list of delegates. And I was like, no, but I want to hear about this. So then I learned what a closed committee was, and I promptly went over to programs. But that's my funny thing that I did as a brand new member, but also shows that I was ready to hear what the leaders wanted to say right from the beginning. Okay, so we're going to go through a few different things now about really utilizing committees to have the best impact and value. So before we actually start working in our committee, we have to talk about what the goals are as a chapter. So with each new year, as you have newly elected officers or you receive new information from your director of bands or have a new membership set, it's important to have a conversation as a whole group about where do we want to go. We can listen through the officers' nominations applications and packets to see where their thoughts are, but then we have to come to that consensus as a group of where we want to go. So that takes place with a full chapter discussion. I encourage these conversations to happen actually throughout the year to say, here's how we've moved over the last quarter or over this semester. How do we want to adjust for the next one? The next thing that we want to do is, I don't know why that effect is happening on all of the text. It doesn't happen like that when I'm just going through it by myself, I swear. The next thing is to take those goals and then break them down into which committee and which officer grouping is responsible for them. For the most part, these should be obvious of a service-related project going to a service committee. If you have a special projects committee, then they would take on some of the national programs, things like that. But you want to explicitly delegate kind of, this is where we want to go, and give that committee clear guidance on how they should, not how they should be working, but what the expectation is for the deliverable, I guess, of that work. So specific charges, if there's specific projects that need to be worked on, and then starting to talk a bit about, is this a this term project? Is it a this academic year project? Is it, we have the 50th anniversary coming up in 5 years, we need to start reaching out to alumni and talking about it now. 5 years may be a bit too much, but you get the idea. And then the last thing to really effectively utilize committees at the chapter level is then having chapter involvement, like I've been talking about. So giving those interim updates on progress. This could be through the committee having a report at each chapter meeting. It could be rotating through the committees each chapter meeting, or in a succession per chapter meeting to have a deeper dive so that the committee can really share kind of where the discussion went and allow for more chapter discussion to make final decisions. And this is also the time that we bring the committee work back to the chapter to say, we have this project coming up, we need X amount of people to sign up for this task, or we have our fundraiser coming up and we want to make sure that we have all of our steps in place, and for people to bring soda or whatever the case might be. Do these steps make sense, or do they resonate with kind of how your chapter operates with committees? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods, so that's good. All right, so now I'm pushing it back to all of you. So what are your chapter's committees and any thoughts that you have about them for right now? Who wants to chime in? Yeah, Ashlyn.
So my chapter has a committee for each office. We have 9 officers, so we have 9 committees. Or that's not true, we don't have a presidential committee. So we have 8 committees. We have membership and education, service and special projects, rituals and regalia, fundraisers, history and traditions, alumni outreach, sisterhood, and joint relations.
Ah, okay. All right. Those sound like, I think, common ones that we have. And then within the committee, is it chaired by that officer, or is there another leadership level in there?
No, it's chaired by the officer, and then the president is also a member of all of the committees.
Right. Okay. And then Michael, I'll come back to you in just a second. In the chat, we have Caitlin sharing that there's history preservation, ritual, PR, and public relations. I have a question about that. Sisterhood, fundraising, membership, alumni relations, and DEI. So Caitlin, if you don't mind to expand a bit upon what the PR committee does, is it more just like communications in general? And then if you wanted to share a bit about kind of the DEI committee and either when it came up, or if this is something that your university encouraged or was chapter driven.
So our PR committee, they work a lot on our social media, other chapter outreach, and they work a lot on the new alto and the podium, that those kind of submissions when those come around. And our DEI committee is actually pretty new and it's very unique. So every member of our chapter is required to be in like a regular committee, and DEI committee is a separate committee from that. So they're spending a little bit extra of their time volunteering on the DEI committee. It's still pretty new, but they kind of work on, whenever we have MCs, they go to a meeting and they do a DEI presentation. They work on how we do DEI through our recruitment, how we relate it all back to the 8s and 5s. And they just work super hard to make sure that we are having all of those qualities and values in everything we do.
Yeah, that's great. And I wonder if either you or another member of your chapter was able to attend Dr. Webb's presentation yesterday, that was focused on DEIA and how we can bring diversity both in our band or celebrate diversity in our band programs and in the chapter.
Our DEI chair went to that.
Okay, great. Yeah, Dr. Webb, Latoya is one of the best people. So I would encourage you just to say like, hey, Dr. Webb, do you think you could come and hang out with our committee for a little bit just to talk about it a bit more too? All right, and then jumping back to Michael, I didn't want to forget about you. How do you all, what committees does your chapter use?
So our chapter actually only has 4 committees. So we've got membership, history, ways and means, and then service. So I guess it operates a little differently than what I'm hearing from other chapters, but yeah, we just have the 4 main ones. And then each of those has like different things that kind of fall under their jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, that each chapter, whether it's based on the tradition of how committees have been utilized in the past or with a number of members or kind of what's going on, how that can kind of ebb and flow from chapter to chapter and year to year. Dejanay.
So we only had like 2 chapters. I mean, 2, not chapters, committees. And then basically we had a digital one, which is basically like the PR one. So it was making flyers and taking pictures and stuff like that. And then we had a hospitality type committee, which is hands-on actually doing stuff. And my thoughts on it is I personally didn't like that fully. So that's kind of why I'm in this one, to see better committees to do and how to improve that. But those were our 2 committees.
Okay, and you'll definitely like then the next activity because we dive into really what the example committees that I have can be working on. So let's jump right in there. So common TBS committees, as I mentioned, are membership and member education, service, ways and means. That could be both fundraising and jurisdiction, and our national programs. They might be combined in different ways. They may be separated in different ways, but that's the general ones that we find across most chapters, not prescriptive, just observation. So now I'm going to put you all just for about 5 to 10 minutes, we'll say. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 people. So I'm going to do 2 groups and we're going to have each group do 2 of the committees for this activity. So once you're in your breakout group, you're of course going to go through and do just some quick introductions. Then for the 2 committees that you're assigned, you're going to talk about how your chapters, if you have them, currently utilize that type of committee, what type of work happens within them, then talk about how it could be used. So we know what's currently going on at the chapter, but perhaps from our discussion so far or from other thoughts you've had this weekend, how we can move forward to be even better for the next year. And then thinking about a dream project that could come from any chapter, not necessarily just your chapter, but for that type of committee. Do the instructions make sense? Okay, so give me just a second. We need 2 breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everyone. I apologize already to room 2, but to room 1, sorry I sent you off with no complete guidance on which committees to talk about. I hope that the conversations were beneficial. So what we're going to do now is kind of just go committee by committee. We have about 15-ish minutes left in the workshop time to go through this. So we'll use that for a good chunk. So for the group that talked about membership, does anyone want to go through what your discussion was like? It doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit.
So I know for us, it was more of we did have membership, right? Yeah. Okay. We started talking about that at kind of like the end but I know for us, we kind of want to ask more on it because it's more of we felt like the committees, we don't really know how to utilize it as well.
Yeah, sure.
And stuff like that.
That's a great transition to the next slide. So for a membership committee, there are a lot of ways you can utilize it. I think that for many chapters, the focus is on supporting new member education or continuing education, but there could be other features too. Of course, now we have the OVERTURE as the national curriculum. So this committee can be utilized to help with prep for activities for OVERTURE, or if you have custom made presentations, things like that. A way that I really like that chapters can utilize a membership committee is to share the wealth of teaching opportunity too. So it doesn't just have to be the VPM or VPME who's doing the education. But you can utilize people who are, of course, prepared and ready to do it, but to either lead a whole lesson or a whole module or just take on an activity, and let the new members and the membership candidates be able to kind of learn about different members of the chapter through that participation too. So I really like that. But in addition, we can think about planning recruitment events. And I mean, I think the continuing education ties back into Overture, but like wanting to go further. So if everyone's really interested in one aspect of the 8 and 5 or one aspect of our history, the committee can be utilized to really learn more and dive into the other resources that TB Sigma has, whether it's on the website, through your district counselors, through your district officers, through the National Council. We have the History and Archives Committee that works on compiling different aspects of history, both looking back to the early years, but also compiling things as they're happening. So we have that living timeline. And that would be a great way to run continuing education activities by connecting with any of those people. Does that sound like something that could be good for membership committees? What are your thoughts, Dejanay?
Like it. It's I didn't even think about the what'd you say? Oh, where some people, different people can, teach. And that's what we did last time, where different sisters would do a different module. And I do feel like that was a time to bond with the people. So I didn't even think about that, but I do agree with that part.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just making sure that whenever someone is going to be leading anything, that they have, of course, notice that they're going to be doing it and having that ample opportunity to prep in those resources to make sure it's successful, which I know we all do and think about, but just making sure we do that consistently. Any other thoughts about membership committee? No? All right. Oh yeah, Ashlyn.
So when it comes to planning recruitment events, I know all recruitment events have to be in the MEP to be approved and held, and that has to be submitted by August 1st, which is typically before we have committees. So how can we still get help with that, you know?
Yeah, I think that especially if you're planning for early fall semester or fall term events, that it's good for the last activities perhaps of the past academic year to be, let's brainstorm, think about what we would like to do. It doesn't have to be down necessarily to the level of detail of on this specific date and time and things of that nature, but to know we want to do this type of activity. My suggestion is to also talk about how does this activity connect back to our values, to having the potential new members and the people that are being recruited learn more about Tau Beta Sigma, and kind of talking about the why behind it. And that way you have what you need as a chapter to bring forward in your MEP form and to that planning for approval. And then you have it much easier to implement once you're back on campus. Does that sound feasible?
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, so on to the next with service. So I think that's room 2 now, right? I think I split them up that way. Maybe? No?
Maybe. We kind of forgot which ones we were supposed to talk about, so we talked about a little bit of all of them.
Okay.
But I'm assuming it was our room talking about service. We talked about how we do things differently in both of our chapters, because we have like a services committee that kind of plans and gets ready for the service projects, but then everyone is required to do a certain number of service hours. So we kind of try to use that as a way for a small group of people to do the planning and get together and make all those decisions, but then everybody helps out with the work. So it's not overwhelming with 20 people trying to plan a service project, but it's not only 4 people doing all the work for it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we utilize it in my chapter, but I know it's kind of different in other places.
Yeah.
In my chapter, we kind of view the entire chapter as the service committee. So we have our vice president of service and our service committee head, and we've tried to have the service committee, and we just didn't like it. So we just kind of view the entire chapter as the service committee, and we always kind of harp on that. because our chapter is really big on service, as everyone is. But especially during like football season, that's when our service really ramps up. So having a service committee just doesn't make sense for our chapter. So I just found it interesting kind of how people utilized it, because we tried it last year and it just was not very productive for our chapter.
Right. And I think that what the both of you have shared is his chapter's focus is more on the planning and prep side. And it sounds like for you, Caitlin, that you're more on your chapter is more on the execution side and thinking about what a service committee can do. And perhaps there's ways that for both that there can be a bit more like, how do specific tasks get delegated and planned, and how does the communication come out, and is it just on the VPS type of role, or is it each person has an opportunity to lead, and thinking through those things as a chapter to figure out if you wanted to utilize a service committee in a new way for this upcoming year, how you could make it work for the chapter, but also still focus on that core value of everyone is contributing to service. All right. So, of course, we've been talking a lot about the different structure. So using committees, especially the service committee, as a way to give structure for regular things. So while I was in school, we were responsible for each marching band practice to set up the drum major podium and to bring like the water jugs. So we knew every single rehearsal that people needed to be on top of that. So the service committee was ones that set up the sign up forms and made sure that we were kind of covered for each day, and then relayed that back. We had a tracking of service hours, things like that, to the officer that was tracking that information. Thinking about large scale band service. So I know some chapters are responsible for like the high school band day in many ways, and kind of coordinating when the school buses arrive and being the chauffeur was the word I wanted, and that's not the word I actually want. The people that bring them through the process when you have a new school come in. I can't think of what that word is, like their liaison maybe for the day, their tour guide, something. So that takes a lot of planning, and that you need a lot of different hands to have detailed conversations. And then of course, also thinking about resources. Is there a specific way that we go about cleaning our uniforms each year, or that we set up for a concert ensemble versus a jazz ensemble for a rehearsal or for a concert performance? And then documenting that and giving the other chapter members or other band members that are helping with that service, because other band members may want to serve in their own personal way but can't make the large commitment to Tau Beta Sigma, letting them know kind of how to go about completing the task so it's done effectively for the band. Does anyone here have that type of documentation for their chapter of like, this is how we do service? So I definitely encourage, I saw a couple of shaking heads no. I definitely encourage you to think about that for the upcoming year, and not to say, let's wait till the end and try to remember what it is, but for each new task that you're doing, just take 10 minutes at the end perhaps to have a debrief and say, how did we do this well? What can we document? Should we take pictures? What do we need to do to make sure that the next year, the next event, the next edition of the chapter is ready to be successful too? I'm all about that kind of prep all the time. Okay, so moving on to ways and means. I don't remember which group had it, and everyone probably talked about everything. So what do you want to say about ways and means? Anybody? All right, I will give us a break. 4 ways and means, some common things are, I think one of the most readily available ideas is coordinating fundraising activities. So brainstorming what we may do, doing outreach to make sure that an event can happen. From a really operational standpoint, being the point people to maintain a budget and ledger. The treasurer is the point person, and the president has responsibilities as well, but ensuring that that information is happening consistently. If there's any questions about it, the committee would be the go-to. And then also thinking about new ways that we can organize ourselves to do fundraisers or to connect with resources at our campus for getting funds for the chapter. I know many student organizations are eligible for grants or for just getting general funds to help support operations. And there may be other resources in the greater community that are looking to help support us while we support the community and bands back in that reciprocal nature. I would love for every chapter to find out if they could get free money from their school. We all pay too much money in tuition, and we should get some of that money back. is my personal take on it. And then last but not least, I think this one is actually kind of pretty straightforward for national programs. Does anyone's chapter utilize a group of individuals focused on national programs as a committee? And if not, what are your thoughts about how that committee could be utilized? Yeah, Michael.
So we don't have like one committee that does national programs. We kind of split it up, split each one of like the stripes into like a different committee that's responsible for it. So that's kind of a way for us. So it's not just like one group of people planning a bunch of different events. We kind of have delegated those to like different groups of people.
I like that. And it goes back to that idea of sharing the wealth for different people to have that real ownership and leadership opportunity. All right. So of course, we would want a committee or a group of people that are working on that, whether it's officially a committee or just delegated individuals, to work on advertising materials, to do outreach and research different women in music speakers or local organizations to partner with, and then also being that point of contact for a speaker, for an event, for organizations we partner with, so that it isn't, oh, I'm just working with the chapter. It's, I'm working with Michael Porter from the Beta Sigma chapter, and we're able to develop that relationship and consistency in communication. All right, so how do we make the committee's work for your chapter's needs? This is really just a list of questions to consider. So once I get to the bottom, I encourage everyone to like screenshot and take pictures to bring back these questions to your chapter. So first is, how will the committee be led? Is it by the executive officer? That I think, Ashlyn, that you were saying that's how your chapter operates. Is it with an appointed chair? Is it with just individuals who are interested in being on a specific project? So there's maybe not as well structured point person outside of an executive officer, but individuals are tasked with projects and tasks. Oh, this whole swiping words is very annoying. For scheduling and operations, how will you actually conduct the committee meetings? I know of some chapters that they pair their regular weekly or bi-weekly chapter meeting with the immediate hour following it to be a focus on committees. Everyone's already together, probably in the band hall or the student union, and we may as well maximize our time together by having those conversations, or flip it and have the committee meeting and then report on discussion. Or it could be that each month a committee has a different opportunity to be the feature for the chapter, with meetings taking place outside and then a focused discussion once every term, perhaps during the year. And then how are we going to assign members to the committee? Is it just based on interest? Is it a rotation through the year or through over a series of years where everyone will serve on each committee at some point in time? Is everyone involved? We have some chapters that are very, very, very large, like 50 plus, 70 plus. And how can we then effectively utilize committees even when those groups are quite large? And I think the last question that I have here is one of the most important ones, is how are we creating new opportunities to serve? So through this, if it's based on interest, if it's based on a rotation, how do we get people and members involved and engaged with each aspect of their participation? So not just to sit and listen in the background of a conversation, but to kind of sink their teeth into it and have opportunities to first observe, then to be a part of it, and then to lead, is the 3 steps I like to follow. Are there any thoughts about these questions or other questions we should add? I'm keeping an eye on the chat too, in case we don't want to speak out loud, but we want to type out loud.
I had a question. In the past, like year or two, a couple years, in my chapter, a lot of the committees have been like the committee head who like does a lot of work, does a lot of planning, but there's not usually like a lot of like input from the rest of the people in the committee. How would you recommend like making sure that it's not just like one person doing a bunch of work and planning and telling them what to do, but it's more of like a collaboration?
Right. And I think it kind of goes back to one of the earlier slides about setting out what the goals are as a chapter right from the beginning, and then having conversations during that chair appointment process, or if it's an officer that's running it, having conversations during elections or appointment about how we want as a culture in our chapter to be all inclusive, to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to speak and that the weight of the world doesn't rest on their shoulders. We're all carrying it together. So I think it's some of those conversations from the outset, and then for the president and the executive leadership team to kind of be mindful of that if it's an expectation, and you see that the treasurer, who's the head of the finance committee, is the only one that's running these programs and everyone else is just kind of being ordered at, to say, let's have a talk, like how can we expand our fundraising? How can we get the newest class involved and use that as an opportunity to have it's a feedback conversation too. We want to be more inclusive. We want to make sure everyone's engaged. How can we help you to lead those conversations at the committee level? They're hard conversations to have. So if you're thinking about facing one of those and want to talk through it a bit more, have a sounding board, I'm always happy to be that for chapters and for leaders. But I think it's some of those steps early on, and then having everyone commit to it, and then hold one another accountable. That was a very good question. All right, keep on going as we start to wrap up, because the next session starts in 2 minutes and I just realized it. So benefits for members, of course, you get to have a direct impact on the chapter activities, working closely with people outside of your section or your member class. Opportunities to lead. Like I said, the first is to observe. So new members should come in, learn what it means to be a member of Tau Beta Sigma and how we operate. Then really be able to participate and contribute in those conversations, and then keep moving up. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to have just an upward trajectory, but the ability to take on projects and lead to their level of interest, and feeling confident with the experience they've had before with their ability to do so. And then taking deep dives into different aspects of the organization and our programs. Benefits for the chapter, on the other hand, are being able to engage everyone in conversations and work, being able to take on all of the right things. We still don't want to do all of the things, but all of the right things for the chapter, focus on our TBS programs, developing leaders through different project assignments and experience, and then, like I said, getting new members involved in business. So I know we talked before about to go further, go together. So I think it's going further as a chapter. You can go further as a chapter when you work together with committees. And I don't know if anybody else saw, but the camels took a nice mosey across the screen on their journey together. It was a very long journey. And I want to thank you all for your time today and for really showing up on a Sunday in the summer to learn a bit more about Tau Beta Sigma. I think that we have a very bright future from each of your commitment to the organization and to your chapters. So thank you all. Does anyone have any questions? And to talk more about committees and all things Tau Beta Sigma, you can reach me, Allison with 2 L's, at tbsigma.org. Stop sharing now, but truly, if anyone does have questions, you can always reach me via email, Facebook. I'm not the best with following messages on Instagram. My personal Instagram, TBS, is different. But you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about anything that comes up. We do have another session that's starting right now in Zoom room 1, so I hope to see you there. And I hope that you all have a great rest of your day and a great summer too. All right, see you in Zoom 1.